So we've got Scott Waller here, who's the Associate Partner at EY here in Perth for Emerging Technology. Have I got your title right there, Scott?
Yeah, close enough. That will do.
Okay, excellent. We'll get back to you in a minute and we'll get you to talk a bit more about what that actually means. But to introduce myself, for those who don't know, I'm Daniel Linden. I run a boutique recruitment agency here in Perth called Transparency IT. And that's all about finding the appropriate IT contractors or permanent staff for any IT departments in the enterprise, or even, for IT companies as well. And one of the reasons why I'm going ahead and doing this webinar series called the Business Impact Series is that I constantly talk to IT managers and IT leaders, and they always, coming across similar problems, and a lot of those problems are to do with not just the technology, but the impact that technology has on business and the difficulties in getting things approved by boards or helping boards understand and trust the technology that is being presented to them, as well as all the standard stuff around keeping the lights on and everything else. So this series is really about trying to get to know, particularly this episode, really about emerging technology and its impact on business. And Scott lives and breathes it. So Scott, why don't you start by telling me, I suppose, a bit about what your role is at EY around emerging tech?
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having me on today. So I really wear two hats when it comes to emerging tech. One is very much helping clients and companies out there really seize the upside of the opportunities around emerging tech, which as you've said is not just about successful technology implementation. Often that's the easy part. It's navigating the governance, the risks, the compliance implications of playing in a domain which is still emerging, and often where there aren't standards and precedent and regulations or others who've gone before that you can lean on. The other part of my role is an internal role, and it's really trying to disrupt EY as a 100-plus-year-old consulting company that's used to delivering services through people to become more tech-enabled, which is often the harder part of my role, to be honest.
Yeah, look, I can imagine. I mean, my experience with, I suppose, accounting companies and professional companies of that ilk that, like you say, have been around for a long, long time, is that change can be hard and they can be quite resistant to it. I know my accountant, for example, is resistant to electronic signatures, for example. That it is. I suppose it's an industry from that point of view that probably needs disrupting.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. Sometimes it's not necessarily the willpower. It's often practical things like what the auditing standards or accounting standards require in the way of paper and wet signatures and
Sure.
things like that. And often we come across the restrictions we face internally are often the same restrictions our clients are facing. Just the other day, I was having a conversation with a major resource company who is trying to digitize a lot of the supply chain and are running into barriers around the acceptance in different jurisdictions of electronic signatures, as you mentioned.
Right.
And this is key trading partners, key markets. Without that, they are not able to actually achieve the benefits of a pretty significant digitization of the supply chain that they're going after, because literally they will have to take all the digital documents that they've produced, print all those out, package them up, get a wet signature, and send them off, which just kills the entire business case of what they're doing. So often it's not the tech, it's some of the mindsets out there, and when you're dealing as well as a lot of our resource companies do into still emerging markets who maybe aren't on the bleeding edge of some of this and the regulations haven't caught up, that's not to be underestimated.
Yeah, right. I can imagine. That certainly makes things tougher when it's not just the people that are being resistant, but also the legislation, so to speak. So yeah, it makes it very tough. So at the moment, let's get I suppose, a state of the market sort of update. What are you seeing out there at the moment in terms of types of industries and businesses that are really probably jumping on emerging technology, and what are some of those specific technologies they're starting to implement?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think in some respects, adoption of emerging technology is industry agnostic. I mean, there are probably sectors that have been, leaders and really forged the way in the research and development space. If you look at the likes of Amazons and Googles and some of those tech companies from America who have done the heavy lifting over the past and really now created consumer grade products for companies, for the rest of us, which are more turnkey. I think now what we're seeing is, companies now have a cloud first strategy. So there's a big adoption there. A lot of corporates are looking at automation in their back office. So in finance functions, in tax functions, a lot of the routine processes and document processing that people used to be doing manually now has a level of automation around that, whether that's using things like optical character recognition or robotic process automation to really bolt on to existing email systems and digitize those processes to take cost out, but also to improve the quality.
Sure. So we're seeing a lot of back-end admin functions going through a more robotic, systemized process that probably used to use a lot of hands-on people skill, which is now turning into, like you say, like a more robotic process automation sort of system. Can you give any specifics around, I suppose, the sorts of processes we're talking about there, or maybe even just very briefly, what's robotic process automation as opposed from just any automation?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example, an internal example to EY actually that we have implemented within our business around auditing and taxation work we do. So a big part of what we're required to do when we're auditing contracts that our clients may have, to understand different conditions and clauses in those contracts around contract pricing, contract length, different clauses, risk clauses in those contracts. Historically, and these contracts often are in the hundreds of pages. Historically, someone would sit down and sift through that contract and pull out the requisite terms, and then apply their professional judgment over the top after they'd spent hours and hours actually finding those terms. Now we have a contract reading system that has been trained through a machine learning model to pick out the requisite terms from those contracts and pre-parse that document. So when the professional is sitting down to look at that, they don't start with the page flipping and actually finding the terms. That's pre-done by the machine learning algorithm.
Yeah, right.
And so you're taking a big element of cost out of that. And to be honest, you're improving the quality because the machine learning model is much more accurate in terms of making sure it finds all of those terms. The way that's been built is a combination of RPA, which is the robotic process automation you mentioned, in getting the document, putting that document through a machine learning model. The machine learning model is then really trained by a professional, so there's some upfront time spent training that, but then the payback then is taking out a big element of cost and also improving the job satisfaction of the trained accountant who actually applies their time on the judgmental aspects and the understanding aspects rather than sifting through pages and pages of documents. So I think it's an example of how in more corporate functions, be it HR, be it legal, be it finance, where there's a real productivity opportunity on taking out some of that routine work and improving job satisfaction, but increasing quality at the same time.
Yeah. Do you mean we're heading towards a time where I won't have to read the fine print anymore of big contracts. I can just have it summarized by a machine for me.
Maybe don't tell your lawyer that just yet, but yeah, certainly, that's one area where there's been huge advancements, of course, in machine learning and algorithms' ability to be trained by a human to look for when things are in a standard format. The machine algorithms are very good at replicating that.
Yeah, excellent. And did you face, challenges sort of getting that sort of technology through at EY? I mean, what sort of hurdles did you come across with that, and how did you get through them?
Yeah, many. One of the challenges we had was around quality. So how do you know that the algorithm, how do you even set an acceptable bar for what is
Sure.
What's acceptable to you in terms of the terms that are picked up? So is it 99% accuracy? Is it 98? And then what do you do with false positives, or when things are missed? People seem to be comfortable. The reality is, in the analog world, people make mistakes, but they're not as obvious as when a machine makes a mistake, because a machine will tell you when it makes a mistake, whereas within the human, it's just missed, right? And unless there's some ramification down the line.
So when it's also, as humans, we're less able to accept the fact that the machines make mistakes, and therefore then that sort of, I suppose, rocks our trust in the technology at all. So one mistake is a whole lot bigger if we feel it's been made by a machine rather than ourselves.
Yeah, correct, and that's been a big part of the journey we've been on with talking this through. Our internal risk management functions and quality people around how controls and methods can be put around the program to soften the impact of some of that. So, one of the terms in the industry is the notion of a human in the loop. So this isn't a black box algorithm sitting there that runs lights off with no human interaction. So in our case, there's still someone checking the output of that work. There's still someone who can correct the algorithm if it makes a mistake, and I think thinking through the training process as well was critical to getting the acceptance. So how do you train the algorithm? With what data do you train it with? And setting some ground rules around what you're actually aiming for, and being realistic about what the analog processes quality state is today, because as you say, it's there's still mistakes that happen, of course, in the analog world.
Yeah.